Okay, the third and final type of limit we're going to need to be able to do is to find limits from an equation. And so far, right now, we haven't fully figured out how to do this just yet. So there's a couple techniques I'm going to recommend for you. The first here is that if we're given an equation for a function instead of a graph or a table, we could just create a graph or a table given the equation. And so again, if we have a graphing calculator or we know how to graph them, like we could just throw that in there and see what we get, or make a table. And so I'll go ahead and show you one or two of these with a table. I'm not going to go through each of them because it would take a little bit too much time, I think. But I'll at least get you started, and then hopefully you're able to kind of go through the rest of them. And again, it's good practice to just calculate these things in a practice sort of way anyways. So then we're going to talk about the algebra skills that we use to help us. So what I want to make sure that everyone understands before we kind of get into the math part of this is that each of these limits are approaching 1. So just as a heads up on that. And then we're given a bunch of different equations. And so for the first one here, like I'm just going to kind of show you a table. If we were to create a table for this, what it would look like. And so for example, for the first one, I'll create this X and Y table that I'm approaching 1. And so I'll start by plugging in like 0.99. I plug that into a calculator. I square it, I put it into each of these X values into the equation, and I should get something like 1.4875, which I'm rounding, by the way. Then I want to plug in something closer to 1. So again, I'm still coming from the left side here, but I'm going to get closer to 1, so 0.999. Plug that into the X values, calculate, and get 1.4987. And then I'll just actually plug in 1 at the end here, but that's kind of the general idea. I can kind of see what's happening here with my Y values. Looks like they're, approaching 1.5 is what it looks like. If I were to come from the other side, right, so let's say like 1.01 and 1.001, if I plug those into the calculator, I get something like 1.501, 1.512. And so as I'm approaching the X value of 1 from the right side, it looks like I'm also approaching 1.5. So the limit here at this point, without even plugging in 1, the limit I can tell is going to be 1.5. So like when I kind of go up to this point here, I can say 1.5. I want to show you here that it's nice and easy sometimes where if we actually just plug in the value, if we plug in 1 into the equation here, 1 squared plus 2, and then plug in 1, we get 1 plus 2 over 3. Over 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 over 2 is 1.5. So I get my limit just by plugging in the X value. So algebraically, I just want to plug in that X value, and that'll tell us what the limit is. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. So if we tried that for the second one here, for B, do this in blue. If I tried plugging in 1, at the top I would get 1 squared, which is 1, minus 1, over, plug in 1, 1 minus 1. I'd get 0 divided by 0. And I can't divide by 0, which is why I kind of get an issue here. And so for B here, that's when I would kind of come back to this idea of plugging in values like 0.99 and 0.999, because if I plug those values in, I should get some actual numbers or values. So I'm going to put it back on you a little bit, and hopefully you can plug some of those values into the limit, see what you get, and you should be able to tell the full two-sided limit. And again, if let's say the left and the right side don't approach the same thing, if these two numbers here were not the same, well, then we would say that the limit does not exist. But it just depends if the left and the right side are approaching the same value. So I would continue trying that. We'll talk a little bit more when we all get back together about how we can do this algebraically. But for now, I just want you to try plugging in some numbers to see as we approach 1, as we get really close, like 0.999 and 1.001, what are we getting close to?